It's the end of the world again. Yep, I'm rereading The Stand. Both versions. Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. I'm Dave Musson, at Dave Musson on Instagram. This is the place where I talk to you about all things Stephen King. And in this video, I'm continuing my chronological reread of Stephen King's works. And I'm up to 1978's The Stand. But I'm not just reading the original version of The Stand. I'm also parallel reading the uncut version from 1990 as well. Basically because I don't want to have to read The Stand twice with a few months apart, but also because I've never read the two together and I want to compare and contrast as I go along. And in this video, well, you're going to follow me on my journey through these two giant books. So there'll be a vlog of me going through these books. And then at the end, I will offer some final thoughts. We will check off how The Stand scores against my Stephen King bingo card. We will discover what 3 things I liked and 3 things I disliked about The Stand, things I spotted reading in The Stand for the first time this time, some of my favourite quotes, and I will give The Stand a score out of 5. This time I think it's going to have to be 5... 5 snotty tissues, I think. I think that's the best way, because nothing worse than a summer cold, is there? So that's what you're going to get in this video. So if that sounds like fun, stick around. I will also tell you a little bit about The Stand, my previous experience with The Stand, and I will show you my editions. Although, I mean, you've already seen them, but I'll show you them again. Does that make sense? Cool, I'm rambling now. Let's cut something more coherent. So before we get into the rereading vlog, just a couple of quick plugs. You can check out my collection of short stories, Once More Around the Sun, which came out in the summer of 2024, has won some awards, makes me feel very, very proud indeed. But not so proud like Mother Abigail that I'm going to go and walk out into the woods and just abandon my family, because I'm not religious like that. I'm rambling again. You can pick that up. That would be super. And you can become a member of this channel. Yes, you can become a constant viewer and get early access to regular videos, exclusive access to exclusive videos, special emojis, and just that warm, lovely feeling of supporting one of your creators directly. And there's a train going past. And if you remember, you get a special train emoji for every time that happens. Train! Okay then. The Stand. One of, if we're talking in general terms, one of Stephen King's most beloved books. You look among any lists of constant readers' favourite Stephen King books, and The Stand will almost certainly be up there towards the top. It's certainly one of his most famous books. It's his end-of-the-world apocalypse tale, a battle of good versus evil. So the original version came out on the 3rd of October, 1978. But famously, that original version was lacking about 400 pages from what Stephen King actually wrote. And he basically did the cutting himself because otherwise it would have been done for him. But I don't think he was ever satisfied. And fast forward a few years, 1990, the 8th of May, to be precise, we got The Stand Uncut revised edition with all of that additional stuff put back in. Some of the pop culture references tidied up, some of the dates tidied up, and the full, more coherent picture of The Stand. And that tends to be the version that most people read. It's certainly the only version I'd ever read before this. And yeah, it's the one that Stephen King wants out there. So my relationship with The Stand, dunno, a little tricky. I'm not the biggest fan of The Stand. My memory of it is just being bloated and ploddy and just getting bogged down in the minutiae of what's going on in Boulder when they're trying to rebuild society and the damn meeting notes. So I'm interested to go back because I know I put The Stand very low in my overall ranking of Stephen King's works, which wound a few people up in the comments section, but that's where I put it. Truly, I don't really care for it all that much, but I'm interested now to see if it might climb in my ranking or even if it might drop in my ranking because, like, you never know. I've read it twice before. The first time would have been fairly early on in my King journey, so probably around 2011, 2012 maybe. And then I reread it in 2019. It was the book I was reading when I became a father for the first time. I mean, I wasn't reading a book at that exact moment, but you know what I mean? That part of that particular year, because I've always got a book that I'm reading. The book that I was reading when I had time to read at that point of 2019 was The Stand. And I've got a photo of me holding my baby son on my lap. He's like 3 days old. And I was reading him the end of The Stand. That was one of the first things I ever read to him, which you would think might make me sentimental for The Stand. It doesn't. I still don't really like it as a book. And I would have much preferred, you know, for him to have been born maybe a month later and I could have been reading The Dead Zone to him because that's my favourite one. But hey, the world doesn't work the way you want it to always. And I should have read more earlier in the year and been a bit more strategic about it. But anyway, I'm rambling again. Sorry. The Stand, yeah, I'm not the biggest fan. I'm intrigued to see what happens with it. And I'm very intrigued to read the two ones side by side, because this is something I'm planning to do with The Gunslinger as well. And I'm curious, obviously the pop culture differences are the pop culture references are going to be different, and there's not going to be as much text in there, but I'm just interested to see how the two pan out. Will I feel like the original one is a bit breezier, a bit more streamlined? I don't know. These are all things to be discovered. And you're going to discover that with me as I go through this. So you'll get a vlog. And then, as I said at the start, we'll get all those final thoughts at the end. But before we do that, let's have a closer look at the editions I'm going to be using for this reread, shall we? Okay, so I've got two editions, and I'm going to be making use of both of them for this reread because one of them is the original cut. So this isn't a first edition paperback because this says author of Christine in Pet Sematary, which came out after The Stand. This is like a 1985 edition, maybe. Certainly mid-80s, because the most recent one listed in there is Christine. Yeah, this is 1985. So this is actually from the year I was born. Picked this up secondhand online a few years ago. So that is my original edition. I like the font in this. The cover doesn't really say The Stand to me. But I mean, that to me just says the guy who does the song Fire. Do 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 burn. Right? Yeah. So that's that one. There you go. A nice close-up look. And then I have my edition of the complete uncut version, which is part of my Rainbow Hodder range. You can check out my video going through the full Rainbow Hodder range if you want to, because it's from the mid-noughts. I mean, I guess that's meant to be a crow on the front. It kind of looks like a sparrow to me, or a blackbird, but I would assume it's meant to be a crow for flag. And I mean, these are chunky books, aren't they? Even the one with 400 pages fewer, it is still a chunk. And this one, I mean, it's daunting, right? But those are my two editions. I feel like I've just rambled. So if you're still here at this point, thank you. And your treat now is to join me as I reread The Stand. And then I'll see you at the other side of the blog for some hopefully more coherent and less rambly final thoughts. See you in a bit. So I've been rereading The Stand for a couple of nights now. I'm trying to pace myself with these vlog updates because obviously The Stand is massive and I'm reading it twice and I'm sort of working it out as I go along. So the rhythm I've settled into is that my core reading is the original version because I've not read that version before. But then what I'm doing at the end of each chapter, I'm hopping over to the uncut version and just doing a skim read to see if anything is different and obviously to spot where stuff has been added. And as I record this, so I'm 140 odd pages into the original version, and that translates to like 280 pages in the new version, or the uncut version. So yeah, you can see, right, it's not just the fact that the kid gets added later on. There's stuff being added the whole time. So how best to do this? Let's have a look at some of the stuff that has been added. So the preface with Campion escaping from the base, that's only in the uncut one. And definitely a better opening than the original one, which is, it's whatever we get to. Oh yeah, it's Campion's car crashing in Texas, which is okay as an opening, but the Campion sort of panicked escape from the army base is definitely stronger. Some other stuff that's been added, there's like Franny and her mum with the argument and the slap. That's really good. I hadn't realized that wasn't in originally. And Fran in the parlor. We get more death in Shoyo with Nick. We get like more details of people dying in that, which is fun. We get an extended scene of Lloyd with his lawyer, basically learning that he is completely screwed. Although the lawyer thinks that taking one particular line will help get him off. That's interesting. Gives us a bit more Lloyd, which is always good. What we do get more of is there's like a chapter that goes around and we see how the army is controlling the military, and we get more of that in the uncut version, which is stuff I really enjoyed, like the coup in Boston, the news set, and the live executions on the TV set in Maine as well are both sort of in the new one, or in the uncut one. So yeah, there's also a reference to Ride the Lightning in the uncut one on page 232 of mine. Now, the phrase Ride the Lightning from The Stand inspired Metallica to use it for the album and song, but it's obviously not this reference because this isn't in the original one. So I haven't found the reference in the original one yet, but I'm guessing I will come to it at some point. So other things I noticed, like there's like little cultural references. So there's a bit I think where Larry's mum is talking and references disco music that gets updated to rap music, and what's really noticeable is King like fine tuning his process on this. So there's a few lines in the original where he literally uses the same word in the same twice in the same sentence or on consecutive sentences, and like little bits like that he's tidied up. Which I do like. What else have we got? Got some illustrations in my uncut one, which I'll show you in a minute. There's also one of the added bits, so we get the sort of the fired army general who goes down into where it all started to kill himself. And there's this weird line about him having an urge to. So he discovers the couple who had died naked because they basically screwed and then killed themselves. And he has this urge to touch the dead woman's boobs to see if they're hard or flaccid. I mean, that's just a bit weird. And that's probably from the uncut one so far. From the other stuff, I thought where Fran's like internalizing about getting the pill and how she should have just gone to the pharmacist and just been like, the exact line is, "Give me the pill, I'm gonna fuck." Yeah, good, okay. The recurring notion of how summer colds are the worst, I really do like that in terms of the place setting and table setting for what we get to. Some nice stuff I noticed. So it all kicks off, so the alarm gets triggered, the virus gets out on 13th of June at 37 minutes past 2. So obviously 13 and 6 is 19, and it's 37 minutes past 2. So it's 2:37 and 16 seconds. So we get 2 plus 3 plus 7 plus 1 plus 6 equals 19, but also there's a 237 there, which was again just before Kubrick's The Shining. So some fun bits there. Larry's band being called the Tattered Remnants. That's a cool band name. I'd forgotten that, but I do like it. Yeah, there's some weird stuff like the Doctor and Shoyo sort of doing horny banter about the police chief's man boobs. That's weird. A line about where King was musing about black people and how their lower halves of their body are always moving, like they can hear a jive that only black ears could hear. Yeah, okay, fine. What? I'd forgotten. Excuse me, I scratched my head. I'd forgotten about the guy who speaks to Larry in Central Park. and says he's going to achieve his lifelong ambition of going to Yankee Stadium and doing a home run naked and then jerking off on the home plate. It's just strange. But the big thing I've taken from this so far is that I know there are people out there who deliberately chose to reread The Shining when COVID was kicking off. And certainly where I'm at the moment is there's little lines that are so much like the early days of COVID that, like, the people who chose to read this at the start of COVID in particular, I would not like to meet them on a cold dark night. They sound psychotic because the writing about how the message is being controlled and how things are spreading and how there's like, it's all panic and scary in real life, but everything, the media narrative is like, no, it's happening, but it's like, it's fine, it's under control, and we're just taking precautionary measures. Just took me right back. So yeah, scary. Look in the door. I wonder if the monster's going to pop up. So yeah, I mean, it's fine. I'm not. This is of all the stuff I've reread so far, and I know I'm biased because I'm not massively into the stuff, but actually, like, this is just fine so far. My memory was of the early part of the Stand being much more bombastic and exciting than this, and I think it might be about to hit that run. But I'm like 150 odd pages in slash nearly 300 pages in, depending on which edition, and it's just fine so far. So I'm feeling kind of justified that I don't sit on the hype train for the Stand, because there's not much here showing me that I should be. But anyway, I'll probably do another update when I've read a bit more of a chunk of the book, but I will treat you to the illustrations in my Uncut edition, so stick around for that. So that is an illustration of Larry trying to help his mom out. And the next illustration is also from Larry's part of the story. This is he goes to try and use the toilet and discovers a rotting corpse, which makes him hurl. I don't know why all the illustrations are only from Larry's part of the story so far, but hey, I guess we'll find more. Anyway, on with The End of Days. So I made it to the end of book 1 of The Stand in both versions. It's interesting going back with this because in my memory, book 1 was like the stellar part of this book. And then it's kind of book 2 onwards where I start losing interest. But actually on this reread, like, there's not loads in book 1 that I'm crazy about. I get it. It's a lot of characters to introduce, but when it comes to like the Uncut edition, we're talking over 400 pages of just table setting, really. And still nothing much has happened other than lots of people dying. But I don't know. It's kind of frustrating to read because there's still, like, I'm only this far in, but I feel like I've already given up a chunk of time to get that far, and not an awful lot has happened. And the characters, I'm just like, oh, yeah, fine, like, but have them meet each other at least. Like, only towards the end where we saw Stu meet Glenn and then meet Harold and Franny. Like, it's starting to come together. Randall Flagg meeting Lloyd, of course, but I don't know. It's still all a bit shrug for me. So if anything, I think based on current reading, I think my rating of the Stand is probably going to go down on this reread. But there we go. Some bits aside, though, the Lincoln Tunnel scene is still spectacular, terrifying, and just shudder-inducing. And Lloyd being alone in his prison cell and contemplating what he might have to eat, also pretty great. It's interesting, this stretch since my last update, this is really where a lot of the stuff that's added in really shows its value. So some of the stuff we get added in, probably some of my favorite bits, actually, like, in particular, the the sort of final cut section where we do a sort of round town or round the world, or round America at least. And I'm catching up with people who survived Captain Trips and then died in crazy ways. So that's one of my favorite bits for sure. And that was added in as an extra. And some other bits as well that are quite nice, like some of the descriptions of delirium, really, really good. Yeah, a few little things that get mentioned, like cat's eyes and in the tall grass and gunslingers. And a nice one that I'd not remembered at all, or not clocked before, that Franny had been reading a Bobby Anderson book. Obviously, that was added in afterwards because Tommy Knockers hadn't been written when The Sun was originally written. But I thought that was a nice touch. King likes to do that, to bring in his author characters. But yes, I'm done with book one. I've got a couple of illustrations to show you before we go on to my next update. But yeah, I'm having an okay time. Not a bad time, but not a great time either. I've still got a long way to go. It is feeling like a bit of a chore to be reading this now. And I know I'm not doing myself any favours by reading both at the same time, but at least I'm not going to have to read it again in a few months. So, yeah, I'll show you some illustrations and then we'll crack on. So here's Franny carrying her dead father down the stairs out to her garden to bury her. A pained expression is quite something. And here's Lloyd reaching over for something that he might have to resort to if he gets really hungry. Yeah, cool illustrations, and nice that we're not just having only Larry's story illustrated. Anyway, on with the reread. So I am finally past the halfway mark in my reread of The Stand, and well, I'm not having a great time. Yeah, The Stand is definitely going down in my estimation throughout this reread compared to where it was previously. It's just so bloated and frankly pretty dull. Like, I'm about 2/3 of the way through the book now. And really, aside from the start, nothing's happened. Like, people are now gathering in Boulder. And I've just read the bit where Mother Abigail goes off into the woods because she's sinned by having thoughts about being proud of stuff. And Stu and Franny are having sex at every available opportunity. And Harold's showing his true colours. But, I mean, God, it's just so dull. We started having the meeting notes now, which is just, I need that like a hole in the head. Bryn Bateman's really fucking annoying. And yeah, I'm just kind of at the point now where like rereading this is a chore. I've got 3 other books on the go just to give me something to look forward to when I've read a bit more of The Stand. So some things that I noticed. So in the original, some things I wanted to highlight. Very strange line where King is to describe one of the women, a good set of hips on her and a fine porch door between them. What? A porch door? What? Yeah. I'd never noticed before that the judge's name is Richard Farris, an RF. That feels interesting because Richard Farris is used as a pseudonym for Flag somewhere else in King's works. So I thought that was interesting. I'd never clocked that before. And then some stuff from the expanded edition. So the bit that I've just read, we get the kid, which is one of the big bits that I knew was not in the original and is in the expanded edition. I think it's better than what we got in the original for sure, apart from the fact it makes it longer. And then weirdly, I'm finding that the expanded edition, you can tell he tightened the writing up a bit because even though it's way longer, it zips past much quicker than the original does. I think I mentioned in my last update that the tornado scene was in the expanded edition, which I think is wild that it got cut. We've got the the weasels trying to get to Abigail. We get more about Mother Abigail playing music. We get more committee notes, which isn't great. Cracking little line about how nobody knows how long 5 minutes is in the dark. To sort of get across how scary being in the dark can be. I really did like that. But yeah, it's hard. Like, I know King did the cuts himself when he had to take out the stuff for the original version. And reading them side by side, the original version does feel quite crude in how it's sort of taking things out. Like we just jump to different situations. And normally I would be for the writing being tightened and words being taken out. But like I said, weirdly, it's better with more of it. However, my favorite bit of this entire section that I've read, and I've got a couple of illustrations to show you after this, but my favorite bit is Kojak coming back to the free zone. Not just because Kojak's a good boy and we learn about him fighting off a wolf, but we learn that his original name was Big Steve, which is the most stupid name for a dog and also clearly self-referential by the author. But yeah, Kojak is actually called Big Steve, and I fucking love it. Let's have a look at some illustrations, and then I will catch up with you when I next feel able to articulate some words about my trudge through the stand. Because you'll have to trust me on this, but this is Mother Abigail surrounded by weasels with a sack full of chickens. I mean, it's a lot of black. It hasn't really come out very well, but you can just about see it. And there's the kid about to be taken out by all those wolves. Don't tell me, I'll tell you. Can you believe that, Happy Crappy? Well, joy, I have finally made it to the end of book 2 of The Stand. It's been a slog, I'm not going to lie. All of the stuff about Boulder getting set up and all the committee meetings and committee notes, I didn't like it. The previous times I've read it, really didn't like it this time around. But there were a couple of little bits that I did get something out of. The main thing I really got before the end of the book, which is kind of where I feel like I'm getting a new lease of energy to finish this. But when Tom Cullen was in his trance and he gives that description of Flag about being the kind of guy who's, makes birds fall off the cables and make your urine go nasty and all of that kind of stuff. That was such a good description. It will probably crop up in my favorite quotes at the end of this, so I'll read it then. But I did really enjoy that. But yeah, the rest of this has been a real slug up until the point where we know the bomb is going to go off. And you can see, so King put that bomb in because he himself was getting bogged down with the story and felt like it wasn't going anywhere. And he felt like he needed to shake things up and blow something up and kill a few people. And you can see the shift in his writing when he decides that's going to happen and when we're on the countdown from Harold getting it all ready. The writing is just suddenly so much more invigorated and so much more interesting. And the description of the bomb going off itself, like the back and forth between Harold being ready to push the button, the committee all being there, and then the aftermath with Mother Abigail giving her orders and then fading out, and the guys going off to make their stand. Like, it's a cracking end to the second book, and it doesn't make up for the fact that so much of it has been a slog, but at least now, going into the final 200 pages or whatever, I feel like I have got the will to keep going, which is great. I didn't really notice that much different in the Uncut edition, other than there were more ad hoc committee meeting notes, which I did not need. And there was a nice little reference to Stu randomly saying that he swears that back in Arnett, Texas, he served Jim Morrison from the Doors. He served him, helped him get some fuel back in like 1982 or something, which made me laugh because there are lots of theories out there that Jim Morrison didn't die in Paris in the 70s. bit random, but I enjoyed it. But yeah, on the whole, I'm still not having a great time, but I at least feel ready to get through this final book. And actually, if the writing style is more in keeping with the end of book 2, the last couple of chapters, then I think I'll be in for an okay time. So let's see. I don't know how many more of these vlog bits I will get to. I'll probably try and squeeze in one more before we get to the sort of final thoughts. But I'm about 80% there now. I'm nearly done. I can nearly put this book down, which is a good thing, because it is. Yeah, I'm not enjoying this. Even with the good bits, still not enjoying it. So I am finally getting close to the end of this reread of The Stand. I'm about 30 pages before being done. I thought I'd check in just before as a sort of final bit of this vlog. Book 3, the pacing is definitely better. You can feel that the bomb has sort of reinvigorated King's writing, and things are actually happening now, and it's interesting again. Still not great. Still one of the weaker things I've read so far on this reread, but a couple of things I picked up. So in the original edition, one of the characters talking about his soul, his car, which obviously is before Dark Tower by quite a few years, so that was interesting. And so I knew that the kid was a section of the book that got added back in the uncut version. What I hadn't realized was that in the original version, we do get reference to Stu and his gang finding the kid's body, only he's referred to as the Wolf Man. So they sort of find him after the wolves have found him, and he's taken out a couple of wolves himself before being killed. And, you know, they talk about how brave this guy must have been. And obviously that scene is not in the uncut version. So it's interesting that the kid in the original version is depicted as this brave soul who went down fighting, whereas when you read the uncut version, you find out what he was really like. The thing that excited me most, though, was, so I remembered from reading the uncut version that Stu and Tom Cullen discover an old Plymouth with a keyring with the initial AC on for Arnie Cunningham, so it's basically Christine. And obviously I thought, well, you know, King probably retconned that for the uncut version because he'd had Christine out by then. But in the original version, they still find a Plymouth. And there's even a reference to like Stu seeing people riding in the Plymouth with him who he knew were dead. So it's kind of like Christine, 5 years before Christine came out? The initials on the keychain are different. They're not AC. But I like it. This is like the first seeding of Christine back in 1978, which makes sense, I guess, thinking about it, saying it out loud, because Christine was set in 78. So perhaps that is where the idea came for King. He just saw this Plymouth in the stand, and while he was sort of doing these little musings of Stu being in his feverish state and seeing stuff, that obviously unlocked something. So I did like that. But anyway, I'm still struggling with this reread. I'm glad it's nearly done. I think what I'll do now is I've got a couple more illustrations to show you, and then maybe I'll just do one more check-in when I've actually finished, check there's no more illustrations, check there's no more quick thoughts I want to get out there, and then we can get on to the final thoughts. But I've got 4 more illustrations to show you since I last showed you some illustrations from the Uncut edition. So let's take a look at those, shall we? So here's Randall Flagg, very annoyed at the guy who blew Judge Farris's face off. This one's not overly clear to see, but that there is Dana Jurgens impaling herself on the glass. And presumably that in the background is Randall Flagg angry again. And here is Trash Can Man driving back into Vegas with the nuclear bomb. I didn't mention that in my little update just now, did I? Yeah, the whole scene was just such a cop-out. Yeah, I hated it. I hated it every time I've read it, and I hated it this time. Like, the hand of God, the blowing everyone up. It's just thoroughly pointless. Like, why do we have to see all those scenes of the guys going all the way to Vegas for then that type of just no, didn't like it. I finally finished. I'm not going to say too much here because in a few seconds we'll be going into my final thoughts and all those kind of things, but Yeah, I'm done at last. And there are a couple more illustrations to show you. So I'll show you those, and then we'll go into the properly sort of thought out, planned out ending. And we'll wrap this thing up. So there's just a snowy scene from Tom and Stu's walk back. And there's where we get at the very end of the uncut version, the return of Flag. And, well, what do we say? The circle closes, the circle starts again. Anyway, let's go into some final thoughts. Moon. That spells, dear God, I did not enjoy rereading The Stand. Like, I knew that I wasn't The Stand's biggest fan going into this, but I had memories of maybe book 1 and book 3 both being really good, really propulsive, really scary, really exciting, and book 2 being the one that drags it down in the middle and really drains the life out of it. Book 2 definitely does that, but so much of books 1 and 3 I found really dull as well. I think that's my overall experience of this reread, is just dullness and boredom. So in a few minutes, I'm going to talk you through the score on the Kingo card. I'm going to give you my 3 pros and 3 cons, 3 things I liked and 3 things I didn't like. Going to go through things I noticed for the first time, favourite quotes, and give it a score out of 5. But yeah, just to get my overall thoughts out there right away, I was just bored with this reread of The Stand. It was a real shame. And it didn't help that I was putting myself through, reading both versions at the same time. But what I found weird with that is actually the uncut version, which is like half as long again as this one dragged more, the short one. This one felt like the writing flowed better. It was a breezier read for as much as The Stand can be a breezy read. And definitely, if you're trying to decide which one to read, just go for the uncut one. It just has much more flow to it. And some of the parts that got cut from that are some of the best bits. So like the stuff with the kid, although disgusting, is great. The scene with Nick Andros and Tom taking shelter from the tornado, that's in the uncut one, and that's one of the best scenes with those characters for sure. And that one also has more of the sort of the going round seeing how the Captain Trips is affecting people. So the no great loss stuff. So we get more of those in the uncut version. So we see people putting in their entry for the Darwin Awards, effectively having survived this superflu and then dying in silly ways. But also we see like the media being shut down, and we see weird stuff happening on the TV and like the public executions and stuff. A lot more of that is in the uncut version. And it's so much richer than what we get in this. This one, broadly, I think the cuts, in terms of where the cuts were done and not affecting a reading experience, I guess it was okay, but there were parts in this where I just jumped around, and reading the two side by side, you really do miss what's in there. So definitely go for the uncut version if you have the chance. But even so, I wasn't a big fan of either, but I was just amazed at how a book 400 pages shorter than that other one could feel like it was the slower one and the stodgier read. So for me, all of the bolder stuff was really painfully slow and really dull. And it didn't help that at that point, the most interesting character, Randall Flagg, is off in Vegas, and we don't see him for basically that entire book. We get little mentions of him, but it's all this like sort of little small town drama, I guess, in Boulder that just is not interesting. And the meeting committee notes, God, kill me now. And then book 3 starts off really positive. We get this sort of reinvigorated writing after the bomb goes off at the end of book 2. And book 3 is really propulsive at the start. But then up until the point where Vegas blows up. And then, as I mentioned in the vlog, I didn't like that. That just felt really cheap. It's this really like quite literal Deus Ex Machina. And then we still got loads of pages left. And it's just this slow journey of Tom and Stu back to Boulder, and again just suddenly goes boring again. So yeah, just really disappointing. The only thing I liked about book 3 was just how cool a dog Kojak is, because he basically keeps Stu alive until Tom turns up, which is pretty impressive for a little dog. Or is he a big dog? For a dog. You get what I mean. Anyway, those are some overall thoughts. Let's get into the little sections I've got for these vlogs, and then we can wrap it up. So the score on the Kingo card. So you remember the Stephen King bingo card that I designed to sort of help you look for items to check off whenever you're reading a Stephen King book. There's 19 items on there. And The Stand scores a whopping 11 out of 19. So we get Maine. We get some of it set in Maine. We get the mention of Full Dark. We get 19s. We get mentions of amazing sex, definitely for Stu and Fran. They're always at it. We get the last time such and such saw such and such alive line. That's in there. We obviously get a magical Negro because of Mother Abigail. We also get a magical disabled person, Nick Andros and Tom Cullen. We get blue chambray shirts. We get mentions of nubbins and boobs and all of that kind of stuff. We get brand names, and we get plenty of dead dogs. So that gives us a score of 11 out of 19, which is one of the highest scores so far, for sure, on the Kingo card. So moving on to pros and cons then. So 3 things I liked, 3 things I didn't like about The Stand. Now, there were more than 3 things I didn't like, but the 3 I've picked out for my cons are the entirety of book 2. Even the bomb, which I enjoy at the end, doesn't say, but I still dislike that entire book. There's a line in here, I think, if memory serves me correct, this was describing Mother Abigail, and this is another thing, this is my second con. Describing this character as having a good set of hips and a fine porch door between them. What? And as I mentioned already, the third thing that I really didn't like was Vegas getting blown up. It just felt like a cop-out for me. So those are my 3 cons. What stuff did you not like about The Stand? Let me know in the comments, okay? So on to my 3 pros, the 3 things that really stood out that I did like. As I mentioned when I was discussing the differences between the 2, those no great loss sections where we're just going round and picking off little individual stories, they were great. And actually think about it, that gives me hope that the collection of short stories we're getting in 2025, The End of the World as We Know It, which is other authors writing stories set in the world of The Stand, if they're more like that, then I'm really going to enjoy that collection, because they were definitely some of my favourite bits. Like people dying in silly ways, but also like the media blackout stuff. That was what most got under my skin and I found most effective. So that's definitely one of my pros. My second pro is something I've forgotten, but Larry Underwood's band name, The Tattered Remnants, really good band name that. Like, yeah, I really like that. I would consider using that myself, actually. So a second pro there. And my third pro brought me so much joy in the book, which was a real highlight because I didn't get much joy in rereading this. But by far away the most joyous part was where we enter Kojak's head and we learn that his name previously was Big Steve. Makes me laugh every time. Obviously, Stephen King naming him after himself, but yeah. Calling a dog Big Steve, excellent. I did know a dog called Steve once. He wasn't Big Steve, he was just called Steve. He was a big dog though, but Big Steve, excellent dog name. And my third pro. What things did you especially like about The Stand? Do let me know, okay? Okay, so I'm going to go on to the things I noticed for the first time, which is basically like where I clocked references to other Stephen King works. And there were quite a few, so these are like names, 19s, all of those kind of things. So, right at the very start, when we get the moment where the virus gets out, it happens on the 13th of June, so 13:06, add those together, that's 19. And it happens at 37 minutes past 2 and 16 seconds past that. So, go with me, you've got 2, plus the 3, plus the 7, plus the 1, and the 6. So the 2 hours, 37 minutes, 16 seconds. Add those digits up, you get 19. And also you get a 237 there, which is fun. And that was all praised Kubrick's The Shining as well. So yeah, interesting. What else do we get? In the uncut version, there's a sort of woman bull combination somewhere. I can't remember where now, but it reminded me of Rose Madder. There's a prison guard called Shockley, which is the same name as Al Shockley in The Shining, I think. In the uncut version, we get mention of some puppies that are half collie, half Saint Bernard, which obviously made me think of little Cujo. We get the reference of Ride the Lightning, which inspired Metallica's album and song name. We get a mention of the beam at some point. We obviously get Stovington, which happens in The Shining. There's a line in here where it says they ruined him, which is a word that comes back in Wars of the Calum many years later. We get a line saying that something was as sensible as worrying about the boogeyman in the closet. We get a scene where Stu is watching some deer, which is just like In the Body / Stand By Me. We get a line saying the flu didn't just leave survivor types, which obviously became a story title. We get mentions of that child who was jumping off a beam into a haystack and bust their leg, which obviously is like last rung of the ladder. We get mention of Mother Abigail talking about her grandmother having the shine. There's a sweet-talking salesman character mentioned who is called Donald King, and I'm sure that King's own dad was Donald. So a little reference there, this sweet-talking salesman who just vanishes. I think, as I mentioned in the vlog, the judge's name is Richard Farris. That's RF. That really caught me off guard. Some lines I noticed in the uncut version. We get a bit where some cat's eyes glisten from the tall grass. So Cat's Eye being a Stephen King film, In the Tall Grass being a story he would eventually write with his son Joe Hill. We get mention of someone being like a gunslinger. Franny is reading a Bobby Anderson book, and she is the author in the Tommyknockers. We get a Carmody, obviously not the same Mrs. Carmody as The Mist, but same name. Oh, there's a crow outside. Randall Flagg just randomly watching me as I record. What else have we got? Back in the original version. Oh, there's a mention of the narrow gauge railway between Boulder and Denver, which reminds me of a similar thing in Doctor Sleep that we get many years later. We get mention of the autumn rainy season in Boulder. Of course, there's a story called Rainy Season. Little Leo, little Joe, little Leo, whatever you want to call him, he can read minds, so he's got the shine. There's a mention, I think it was in the context of Flagg, talking about his soul and then his car. And this is in the uncut versions. This is before Dark Tower stuff. And of course, we get the old Plymouth. We get Christine. I mentioned that in the blog. So Christine before he wrote Christine. Oh, and Tom and Stu watch themselves a film in the uncut version, which is kind of like John Coffey getting to watch a film in The Green Mile. But yeah, there we go. Those are all the things I noticed for the first time. Is there anything that you remember from The Stand that feels like it's connected to other works? Do let me know in the comments. So when it comes to a favourite quote, I mean, there are a few lines I liked, but the one that stood out, train. The one that stood out for me more than any was it's in both versions, but it's when Tom is being hypnotized by the guys in the free zone, getting prepared to go out for his trip to Vegas. And Tom just randomly, when he's asked, Tom says that he sees the dark man, and they ask him what he looks like, and Tom says this, and this is a line these are lines that are so good, and they got used in Dolan's Cadillac randomly, if you remember the movie of Dolan's Cadillac, if you remember my video of that, but such a good description of Flagg. So here we go. He looks like anyone you see on the street, but when he grins, birds fall dead off the telephone lines. When he looks at you a certain way, your prostate goes bad and your urine burns. The grass yellows up and dies where he spits. He's always outside. He came out of time. He doesn't know himself. He has the name of 1,000 demons. His name is Legion. He's afraid of us. We're inside. He knows magic. He can call the wolves and live in the crows. But he's afraid of us. He's afraid of inside. Just that paragraph where Tom is like zoned out, but like weirdly lucid as well. And just the way he describes Flagg. That's why Flagg is such a compelling character. Like, to get it across in just one paragraph. Incredible writing, and by far and away my favourite quote in the whole of The Stand. So to wrap up then, my rating out of 5, I cannot remember what we said we were going to do, whether it was snotty tissues, or pages of meeting notes, or random crows, or hands of God, whatever we do. Let's say snotty tissues for now. I'm giving it 2 out of 5, which for many of you will feel like blasphemously low, but I really did not enjoy this book, and I found so much of it so dull. And at this point in the King journey, aside from Rage, which, technically that was a backroom book, so at this point in King's chronology, people didn't know that was Stephen King. If I were reading this as these came out, this would easily be my least favourite Stephen King book. And it's the first time, really, where I finished a Stephen King book and gone, ugh. And it's the first one that has been a slog to get through, because at least with Rage, it was only like 150 pages. So it went through pretty quickly. I just didn't have a good time with it. And it's probably gone down in my estimation since my last read. So if when I've done this chronological reread and I do the overall ranking again, do not be surprised if The Stand is even lower than 56 or whatever I rated it in my overall ranking from a couple of years ago. But yeah, 2 out of 5. So that puts it second bottom of the list. I really should have pulled up my ranking for the rest of the stuff that I've reread, but I think off the top of my head, it will still be Salem's Lot at the top, then The Shining, then probably Night Shift, then Carrie, then The Stand, then Rage. That sounds about right. So next up on the chronological reread will be The Long Walk. But before that, and we'll do this very soon, I've got to go over to Goodreads and find some 1-star reviews of The Stand to see what the real haters really think of this one. So thanks as ever for watching. Do consider becoming a member of the channel, becoming a constant viewer if you like what I'm doing here. And all of those other things I usually plug, you can find them in the description. Really appreciate your support. Take care, and I will see you very soon.